Hi there, Alison here with another Cab Franc du jour. Today's wine is taking us to St-Nicolas-de-Bourgueil, and we're looking at the Domaine Amirault 2017 St-Nicolas-de-Bourgueil Le Vau Renou. The domaine was established in the 1830s by Octave Amirault when he purchased his first few parcels in St-Nicolas-de-Bourgueil. Today the domaine is being run by Xavier Amirault and his wife Agnès, and they're farming around 34 hectares of vines, primarily in St-Nicolas-de-Bourgueil, with a few recently acquired parcels in Bourgueil, including some at Grandmont in Bonnet. The domaine was certified organic in 2008, and they received their biodynamic certification with Demeter in 2011. The estate makes a diverse range of Cabernet Francs, and some of these cuvées employ the philosophy of assemblage, or blending, such as les Caterons, les Cravelis, and also their cuvée Vieille Vigne, while others are cuvées parcellaires. That is to say that the fruit is coming from a single lieu-dit, or a single vineyard, and in St-Nicolas-de-Bourgueil, these cuvées include le Fondit, which is from a parcel on the ancient alluvial terrace, and also le Vau Renou, which is from a parcel on the slopes, or the côte. So this area of the slopes in St-Nicolas-de-Bourgueil represents a relatively small area of the appellation as a whole, accounting for around 1/4, about 25% of the area under vine in St-Nicolas-de-Bourgueil. So about 300 of the 1,100 hectares that encompasses the appellation. And this is because it is the ancient alluvial terrace that dominates here in St-Nicolas-de-Bourgueil. And that's because the Loire River starts to shift its course ever so slightly right around this area. And the ancient alluvial terrace that begins in Rastignac in the Bourgueil AOP actually starts to get wider by the time we get to St-Nicolas-de-Bourgueil. So the area of the vineyards that are on the recent alluvial soils that are closer to the Loire, and the area vineyards on the côte, or the slopes, these two areas narrow quite a bit. So the ancient alluvial terrace and the vineyards on the ancient alluvial terrace accounts for around 65% of the viticultural area in the appellation. So this area of the slopes, which is where Le Vau Renou is located, stretches the entire width of the appellation, which is about 5 kilometers here. And we're at the top end of the appellation. So we're about 5 or so kilometers north of the Loire River. And the slope actually narrows as we move from east to west. So in the eastern part of the appellation, the côte there, right at the western border of Bourgueil, is around 600 or so meters from north to south. And then it narrows as we move west. And once we get past the hamlet of La Gardière, there the côte is in that 200 to 300 meters wide from north to south. The elevation of the côte ranges from around 60 meters above sea level to up to about 88, 89 meters above sea level. And for the most part, the slopes are dominated by south-facing exposures. But because of the tree line and how the slope undulates in places, we will also find the odd southeast-facing or southwest-facing slope as well. In terms of soils across the slopes, these are dominated by sands and silty sands that are of colluvial origin, and the depth of the topsoil will range depending on where you are. And that is then followed by the middle Turonian tuffeau chalk. So we almost don't find any vineyards on the upper Turonian tuffeau chalk here in St-Nicolas-de-Bourgueil, and the middle Turonian tuffeau chalk is a glauconitic micaceous chalk here. Because of these odd pockets of undulation that we do find along the côte, we will find the odd pocket of other soils. So we do find some pockets of clay soils, sandy clay soils that have more flint or sandstone in them. We also will find the odd pocket of aeolian sands, wind-blown sands as well. Looking at the lieu-dit of Le Vau Renou, this lieu-dit is about 21 hectares in size, but only about 11 hectares are planted to vine. The remainder of the lieu-dit is actually up in the forested area. And the lieu-dit is situated on a part of the slope that is just west of the hamlet of La Gardière. And we are on actually a gentle southeast facing slope, just by the nature of how the slope starts to undulate in this part of the appellation. Now, the elevation of the slope ranges from around 65 meters above sea level at the bottom of the slope to upwards to about 88 meters above sea level at the top of the slope. And it is a very gradual, gentle southeast facing exposure. The entire lieu-dit is on that Mediterranean tuffeau, and in fact this is quite key because we have many meters of the Mediterranean tuffeau chalk, and the vines are sitting atop this tuffeau. And this is really interesting because beneath the vines here in the lieu-dit, and then just adjacent to the lieu-dit, just to the east, is where we find the Cave du Vau Renou. And these caves are a series of many kilometers of these tuffeau caves that were quarried out many centuries ago. And this precious tuffeau limestone was then used to construct the buildings and the chateau of the villages of the Loire. And today, these caves serves a purpose for the vignerons. This is where they age and store their wines. Looking at the parcels for Domaine Amirault, they have about 4 hectares here, and it's divided into 2 parcels. And one parcel, or both parcels I should say, are adjacent to one another, and they're located mid-slope. One parcel sits up just a little bit higher than the other, and this is on a different soil. So this is green sandy clays, and they're deeper soils, and they have a little bit of flint in them. And then the parcel just adjacent that sits a little bit lower has more tuffeau dominated soils. We're dealing with a shallower, silty, sandy topsoil, and then we hit that Mediterranean tuffeau chalk bedrock right after that. And in terms of the vine age, the vines are on average around 40 years of age. In terms of the winemaking for this wine, and really actually all the wines for Domaine Amirault, what we're looking at here is micro vinifications. So their 34 hectares of vineyards are divided into 58 individual parcels. In each vintage, they will vinify upwards to 45 micro cuvées, and they will treat each cuvée a little bit differently depending on the terroir. So these 2 parcels are actually vinified separately, and then they're blended, and that's how they are then aged. And Xavier shared with me that the parcel that's on the deeper clays with the flint, this brings more generosity to the mid palate, whereas the parcel where the fruit is on the tuffeau, the fruit that's coming from the tuffeau chalk, this has or brings more finesse, precision, and length. And he also shared with me that it did take them a little bit of time to kind of sort out how they wanted to treat these 2 parcels and how they wanted to approach the vinification. So the first vintage of this cuvée as a standalone wine was actually in 2014. Now, looking at the vinification and élevage specifically, the fruit is all hand harvested. It's hand sorted upwards to 3 times depending on the vintage. The fruit is destemmed but not crushed. Fermentation takes place in 32 hectoliter larger wooden vats with indigenous yeast, and the fermentation temperature is around 22 degrees Celsius, so a little bit on the cooler side for red wines. The approach to extraction and maceration is just infusion here, and then the total time on skins is around 3 weeks. Following the post-fermentation maceration, the free-run wine and pressed wine are blended together, and these are then aged in a combination of amphora and also barrels, 228 liter and 500 liter older oak barrels. And the split is about 50% amphora, 50% barrel, and the total time for the aging is around 24 to 36 months. And the aging is done in the Cave du Vau Renou. So let's dive into this wine. So the wine has a really nice perfume to it, very open, very fragrant. And I'm getting a really nice mix of fruits here in terms of the fruit profile. And I'm just gonna say that actually it leans a little bit more on the savory side, which I really like. And the fruit profile is more in that red fruit spectrum. I'm getting kind of a mix of cherry notes, like sweet as well as sour cherry. There's a little bit of like a little bit of a strawberry fruit leather note, which I really like. Bit of a dried sour cherry note too. Definitely a little bit of a foresty edge to the fruit profile. And I like the pyrazine profiles, coming through very, very classic. A little bit of cedar wood, some cedar leaves. There's a touch of almost like dried tarragon. There's a definite spiciness to the nose as well, and I am picking up a little bit of that wood spice coming through, very classic again, kind of like clove, a touch of nutmeg. But there's also a little bit of a pepperiness to the nose, like kind of like green peppercorn, maybe even a little bit of like a paprika note as well. But yeah, I love the nose. It's really pretty, very, very fragrant, very lifted, very clean, open, super inviting. So let's dive into the palate. On the palate, what leads here are those fruits, and actually the spice comes through really nicely on the palate. And again, I'm getting some of those baking spice notes, a little bit of that green peppercorn thing happening as well. And then there's some additional layers that are coming through. That strawberry fruit leather is coming through in a really nice way. Also getting a little bit of like a candied orange peel note, like a bitter orange, like a Valencia orange, but candied, and I really love that. And it doesn't come through often with Cabernet Franc, but when it does, it just makes me so happy, because I just think it's just such an interesting note that I can pick up with Cabernet Franc. The palate is also a little bit more floral, and there's some more herbal undertones that are coming through. So there's like a purple, like a dried violet note. There's a little bit of a dried rosemary note. This is a 2017, so this wine has had a little bit of time in the bottle. So that makes sense that I'm picking up some of these tertiary layers here as well. There's also a little bit of a nice cocoa note as well. In terms of the acidity is very energetic, very persistent on the palate. It's very sprightly as well, and you feel the acidity really from start to finish, and it kind of like almost crescendos towards the back of the palate as well. The tannins are beautifully managed. Like, we're talking very fine, silky tannins. They have a nice little chalkiness to the finish, but they're just, yeah, they're pretty exquisite actually. They're very, very fine, beautifully woven, and they've got that nice mix of that silky palate experience, and then there's a little bit of chalky kind of tug on the back end. Wine is medium bodied, and there is a really nice sucrosity and ample mid palate happening here. Like, there is that beautiful kind of roundness in the middle, but what's interesting about this wine is the arc of the palate. So it's as if the wine starts in this very focused way, and then it kind of crescendos into this openness and this round profile in the middle, and then towards the back end of the palate, it then refocuses again. So it kind of does this wonderful arc in terms of that experience. So it starts focused and it grows into something really beautiful in the middle, and then it kind of becomes a bit more linear and focused again towards the palate. And I think the acidity is contributing to that, the way the fruit has been handled, the tannins is creating this really, really compelling arc to the palate experience. This is a really, really lovely wine. Very balanced, it's composed, it has a nice degree of sophistication, which is not a word I often use with Cabernet Franc, because you know, that takes a lot of practice to get that sense of poise and sophistication with Cabernet Franc, and this wine is really showcasing that, and is doing so in a beautiful way. It's very finesse driven, yet at the same time it's structured. And the acid profile in this wine makes me just want to pair this with food. And back in the winter time, I remember flipping through a Dory Greenspan cookbook, and she had this recipe for like a seared duck breast with a kumquat red wine sauce. And thinking of that little note of like the candied orange peel in this wine, that is literally what I would be pairing with this wine, is like that seared duck breast. You get that lushness from the duck fat, but the acid will kind of cut through that, but you get that beautiful silky texture, which I think is a nice complement to the texture of a nice rare duck breast. And then with a red wine kumquat sauce, I think that this would be absolutely smashing. But this is a delicious wine, and it shows the diversity that the St-Nicolas-de-Bourgueil appellation really does offer to the Cabernet Franc lover out there. It's very easy to generalize this appellation because of the fact that such a huge component of it is on the ancient alluvial terrace. You know, the alluvial soils give these wines that are very supple, very good for early drinking, but there is so much more to this appellation than what meets the eye. And I'm actually in the process of working on a bit of a profile of the appellation that will get into a lot more detail of some of the key lieu-dit, some of the key producers and wine styles, and to give people a little bit of to give people a guide to this appellation, because I really do believe that we often generalize St-Nicolas-de-Bourgueil as being kind of one thing, but there is a lot to offer here. And Domaine Amirault is really one of those core benchmark producers that should be on your radar. And they are making a really terrific range of cuvées across all styles as well as price points. So this is definitely a producer to put on your radar if you're not familiar with them already. Of course, if you are familiar with the wines of St-Nicolas-de-Bourgueil and you have a favorite producer or a favorite cuvée, perhaps a different cuvée from Domaine Amirault, I would love to hear what that wine is or what the producer is in the comments below. And of course, as always, I'll be back again soon with another wine. Cheers.